The evening was quiet in the small town where an old retired electrician lived alone. His life had become simple after years of working hard with wires, switches, and long days on construction sites. Now his days were mostly filled with small routines, watering the plants in his little garden, walking to the corner shop, and sometimes fixing a broken radio or lamp for neighbors who remembered his skills. He was no longer young, but his mind was still sharp. And though he preferred the silence of retirement, a part of him missed the feeling of being useful. On this particular night, he was sitting in his worn chair with a cup of tea cooling by his side. The television flickered faintly in front of him, but he wasn't really paying attention. He was half asleep when suddenly his phone rang. It wasn't unusual. Sometimes relatives called, sometimes telemarketers, but this call felt different right away. The screen showed an unknown number, and he almost ignored it. Something, though, made him pick it up. The voice on the other side was shaky, almost broken. Is this my assistant?" the man asked in a rush. The old electrician frowned, a little confused. "No, you've got the wrong number," he answered calmly. Normally he would have ended the call right there, but something in the man's tone stopped him. There was fear in it, a kind of desperate fear that told him this wasn't a simple mistake. Before he could hang up, the voice spoke again, weaker this time. "Please, don't go. I need help. I thought I was calling someone else, but I can't. I can't breathe properly." The words cut through the silence of the old man's room. He straightened up in his chair, suddenly alert. Wrong numbers usually ended in a laugh or an apology, but this one felt different. It felt like life and death. The retired electrician pressed the phone closer to his ear. He could hear shallow, uneven breaths on the other side. His years of experience hadn't been in medicine, but he knew emergencies when he heard them. He asked, "Where are you? Do you need me to call an ambulance?" For a moment there was only heavy breathing. Then the man whispered an address, struggling to get the words out. It was a part of the city the electrician had never been to, far from his small town. His mind raced. Who was this man? Why had he called him? And most importantly, how could he help? He asked the caller to stay on the line and keep talking if he could. He wanted to keep him awake, keep him present. The retired electrician's calm voice became an anchor in that moment. As the seconds passed, he thought about hanging up and calling someone else for help. But then he realized if he ended the call, the man might lose consciousness before help arrived. He decided to stay, to keep listening, to guide this stranger through his panic. The man on the other end tried to explain. I thought I dialed my assistant. I just needed help. Please don't leave me." The old electrician's chest tightened at those words. It wasn't just fear. It was the sound of someone completely alone in their darkest moment. He didn't know yet that this stranger was wealthy or powerful. At that moment, it didn't matter who he was. All he knew was that a life hung in the balance, and fate had chosen him, a retired worker in a quiet town, to be the one who answered. The old electrician leaned forward, speaking gently but firmly. "Listen to me. You're not alone. I'm right here. Take a slow breath if you can. Don't panic. Just focus on my voice." He didn't know if his words were enough, but they were all he had. The stranger tried to follow his instructions, gasping but listening. For the retired man, each moment felt heavier than the last. His own heartbeat was faster than usual, yet he kept his tone steady. He knew if he panicked, the man on the other side would panic even more. The call that was supposed to be nothing a mistake, an interruption to a quiet evening, was quickly becoming something far greater. The electrician couldn't shake the feeling that he had been placed in this moment for a reason. He didn't believe in chance often, but this felt like more than chance. As the minutes stretched on, the old man's tea went cold. The television continued flickering with forgotten images, but none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the weak, frightened voice on the other end of the line. clinging to hope through a stranger's calm guidance. And in that still room, filled with the sound of shallow breaths over a shaky phone connection, a bond began to form between two men who had never met, who were worlds apart in status and lifestyle, but who, in that single call, shared the same fragile fight for life. Asterisk, the old electrician kept the phone pressed close to his ear, his mind sharp even though his hands trembled slightly. He could still hear the uneven breathing from the stranger on the other end. Every shallow gasp made his own chest tighten. He wanted to believe the man would hold on, but there was no time to waste. He asked again, slowly and clearly, "Tell me, where exactly are you? Can you give me your location?" The voice on the line cracked, but the words came through, broken and rushed. The caller named a street in the wealthy part of the city, a place the electrician had only heard of but never visited. The address didn't mean much to him personally, but he knew enough to recognize it wasn't an ordinary neighborhood. For a brief moment, the old man hesitated. Why would someone living in that part of the city end up calling him, a retired worker with nothing but a modest home and an old phone? He pushed the thought aside. Questions didn't matter right now. Saving a life mattered. The caller tried to speak again. His voice was fading, weak and scattered. "I thought I was calling my assistant. I can't move much. Chest. It feels heavy. Please don't leave me." The plea shook the electrician. He had never been anyone's lifeline before, not like this. He spoke gently but firmly, the way he used to talk when training apprentices years ago. "Listen to me. Keep breathing. Focus on my voice. I'm going to call for help right now, but don't hang up. Stay with me." Balancing the phone against his shoulder, the old man quickly dialed emergency services with his other hand. His voice was steady as he explained the situation, giving them the address he had just learned. He begged them to hurry, knowing the minutes felt like hours on the other end of the line. The operator assured him that paramedics were already on their way. Relief washed through him, but it was only partial relief. Until they arrived, he was the only thing keeping the stranger alive. He switched back to the call, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "Help is coming. Hold on just a little longer. Can you hear me?" The man on the line groaned, a sound full of pain and exhaustion. "I hear you, don't let me fall asleep." His words slurred. But he was still fighting. The electrician leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as if the stillness of his small living room could somehow lend strength. "Stay awake. Talk to me. Tell me anything, your name, what room you're in, anything at all." For a moment, silence stretched, and the electrician thought the line had gone dead. Then faintly the man whispered, "I'm in my study. On the second floor. My chest hurts. Thought it was nothing. I was alone." The words came in fragments, but they were enough to paint a picture. A man, alone in a large house, believing the end might come without anyone knowing. The electrician's heart clenched. He imagined the stranger lying on the floor of a room far away, surrounded not by people but by silence. It reminded him of his own quiet nights, when loneliness echoed louder than the clock ticking on the wall. The thought that this stranger could die unheard, unseen, was unbearable. He spoke again, his voice low but steady, like a hand reaching out through the phone. "You're not alone. I'm right here with you. Keep breathing with me, one breath at a time." The man tried to follow. The sound of his breathing shifted, still labored but steadier under the rhythm of the electrician's guiding words. The old man realized he was holding his own breath, and he forced himself to calm down too. Knowing that calmness was contagious, minutes crawled by. The old man knew help was on the way, but he feared each second might be the one where the stranger slipped away. He talked continuously, filling the silence so the man wouldn't drift off. He asked him about his favorite color, about whether there was a window open in the room, about anything that might keep him tethered to the present. To his surprise, the man answered, faintly but clearly. Blue, the curtains are blue. That small detail, so ordinary, felt like a miracle. It meant the man was still conscious, still listening, still fighting. The electrician smiled to himself, though tears pricked his eyes. Blue is good. Keep thinking about those curtains. Just hold on until the medics reach you. The old man didn't know yet who this stranger was, or how much his life was worth in terms of money or power. To him, it wasn't about wealth or titles. It was simply about a human life, a fragile, fading voice that had reached out to him by mistake and now depended on him to stay alive. And so, in that small house miles away from the mansion of a billionaire, a retired electrician who thought his days of importance were long behind him kept his voice strong and steady. He was no longer just answering a wrong number. He was guiding a man through his darkest moment, determined not to let him slip away. The sound of distant sirens began faintly crackling through the line as paramedics neared the address. Relief stirred in the old man's chest, but he knew the fight wasn't over yet. The faint sound of sirens grew louder on the other end of the line. The retired electrician closed his eyes for a second, whispering to himself, "Just a little longer. Hold on." He knew the paramedics were close, but until they reached the house, he could not let the stranger drift into silence. "Can you still hear me?" he asked firmly. A weak groan came through the phone. The voice sounded like it was slipping away, but it was still there. "Yes, I hear you. My chest hurts. I feel dizzy." The electrician steadied his tone. "Stay with me. You're almost there. I need you to focus on my voice. Count with me, 1 breath in, 1 breath out. Do it with me." He began counting slowly, his own breathing steady and deliberate. The man on the other end tried to follow, his breaths shallow but matching the rhythm. It was clumsy, uneven, but it meant he was still fighting. Every single breath became a battle, and the electrician refused to let him lose. The sirens grew louder, closer now. The old man pictured the ambulance speeding through the night, lights flashing, pushing its way through traffic. He imagined the paramedics rushing with urgency, guided by the address he had given. But he also knew large homes could be confusing. They needed someone awake inside to unlock doors, to make noise, to guide them in. "Listen carefully," the electrician said. "You need to help them reach you. Can you get to the front door?" There was silence, then the sound of a faint cough. "I can't move that far." His words were weak, defeated. The old man bit his lip, thinking quickly. "All right. Then tell me, are your doors locked?" "Yes." "Do you have a way to unlock them from where you are? Maybe a security system on your phone?" There was a pause, then a faint rustle. The man whispered, "Yes. Phone. I'll try." The electrician urged him on. "Good. Don't stop. Use the phone if you can. Just unlock the front door so they can get in." He could hear weak taps in the background, followed by a groan of frustration. I did it. I think it's unlocked." "Good," the electrician encouraged, his voice steady like a rope holding a drowning man. "Now stay still. Focus on breathing. They'll be inside any moment." He could almost imagine the scene, the stranger lying alone in a large room, clutching his phone, his strength fading but clinging to the sound of another man's voice miles away. It was such a strange, fragile connection, yet it was everything in that moment. Suddenly, through the phone, the retired electrician heard faint knocking and shouting in the distance. A rush of relief filled his chest. "That's them, isn't it? Can you hear them calling for you?" "Yes," the man whispered, barely audible, then shout back. "Make a sound, anything. Let them know where you are." A broken cry echoed faintly, followed by louder voices and hurried footsteps. The electrician's heart leapt. They had found him. Through the crackle of the line, he heard a flurry of movement. The voices of paramedics rushing in, asking questions. The man on the other end was too weak to answer clearly, but the sound of trained professionals gave the electrician a wave of peace. He had done it. He had kept the stranger alive long enough. Still, he didn't hang up. He waited, listening, as though the phone call had tied him to this man's survival. One of the medics must have noticed the phone, because a different voice came on the line. "Who is this?" The electrician replied simply, "I'm just someone he called by mistake. I stayed with him until you arrived." There was a pause, then the medic's voice softened. "You may have saved his life tonight." "Thank you." The electrician sat back in his chair, his eyes stinging. He wasn't used to hearing those words. He wasn't a hero, he told himself. He was just someone who answered the phone. But deep inside, he knew he had done something that mattered. As the call ended, he placed the phone on the table and stared at it. His tea had long gone cold. The television flickered forgotten in the background, but none of it mattered. What mattered was that a man, whoever he was alive. Because a stranger had stayed on the line. He didn't yet know that the man he had helped was not just anyone, but one of the wealthiest figures in the country. A billionaire whose life was worth fortunes in business and influence. To the electrician, he was simply a human being who needed another human being. And that was enough. But fate was not finished with him yet. This call, a mistake that turned into a lifeline, would open doors he never imagined. His quiet world was about to change in ways he couldn't yet see. The retired electrician didn't sleep that night. After the call ended, he sat in his chair for hours, staring at the phone that had suddenly become a lifeline. His mind replayed the desperate voice, the shallow breaths, the faint cry for help. He wondered if the man had survived the ride to the hospital, if the paramedics had managed to stabilize him. A part of him wanted to call the hospital to find out, but he stopped himself. He wasn't family, not even a friend. To them, he was just a stranger who picked up the phone. Morning sunlight crept through his curtains, but he felt no urge to go about his normal routine. His tea remained untouched, his plants unwatered. He kept the phone close, almost expecting it to ring again, though he knew it wouldn't. He told himself he had done his part and that the story was over. But deep inside, he knew it was en single quotes t. 2 days later, there was a knock at his door. It was unusual, he rarely had visitors. When he opened it, 2 men in suits stood on his porch. They weren't unfriendly, but their presence carried a kind of seriousness that instantly caught his attention. "Are you the gentleman who answered a call 2 nights ago?" one of them asked. The electrician's heart skipped. "Yes, I suppose I am." "Is he all right?" The men exchanged a quick glance, then nodded. "He's alive thanks to you. He asked us to bring you to him. He wishes to meet the man who saved his life." The electrician was stunned. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He had expected nothing, no thanks, no recognition. He had been content just knowing the man had survived. But now, to be asked to meet him felt surreal. He agreed quietly, and before he fully realized it, he was sitting in the back of a sleek black car, heading into the city. The ride was long, and he felt out of place in his old jacket and worn shoes, but no one seemed to mind. When the car pulled up in front of a massive mansion, his breath caught. He had never seen a house so large, with gates that opened automatically and gardens that seemed to stretch forever. Inside, the house was silent, almost too silent, but filled with a kind of luxury he'd only seen in magazines. He was guided through wide hallways until he reached a room with large windows and soft blue curtains. Lying in a hospital bed positioned by the sunlight was the man he had heard over the phone, the same voice that had been trembling with fear that night. Now the man looked weak but alive. His face was pale, and machines beeped softly around him, but his eyes were sharp and full of recognition. When he saw the electrician, he tried to sit up, though the effort was clearly painful. "You," the man whispered, his voice still hoarse, but steadier than before. "You stayed with me. You saved me." The electrician froze, unsure of how to respond. "I only answered the phone," he said quietly. The billionaire shook his head weakly. "No, you didn't just answer. You gave me hope when I thought I was dying. Without you, I wouldn't be here." There was a silence between them, a silence filled with emotion. The electrician lowered his gaze, embarrassed by the praise. He had never been one for attention. He was just a man who fixed wires, who lived a simple life. He never thought his voice alone could be the reason. Someone lived to see another day. The billionaire reached out a trembling hand. The electrician hesitated before taking it, feeling the fragile grip of a man who was alive because of fate's strange twist. "I don't know why my call reached you," the billionaire said, his voice breaking slightly. "But I believe it wasn't an accident. I believe it was meant to be." The electrician didn't know what to say to that. He had never believed in destiny, but sitting there, holding the hand of a man whose life he had saved through a random wrong number, he began to wonder if maybe there was some truth in it. The billionaire's assistant entered quietly, carrying papers and updates, but the man waved him away. His focus remained on the old electrician. "I want to thank you properly," he said. "Not just with words. You gave me life. The least I can do is make sure your life is easier." The electrician shook his head quickly. "I don't want anything. I didn't do it for reward. I just didn't want you to die alone." His voice cracked slightly at those last words, surprising even himself. The billionaire's eyes softened, and for a moment, there was no difference between them. No wealth, no class, no power. Just two men bound together by one night, one call, one lifeline. The conversation that followed was quiet, but filled with meaning. The electrician listened to the billionaire's story of working too much, living alone, and collapsing without anyone by his side. In return, the electrician shared small pieces of his own life, his years of work, his loneliness after retirement, his belief that his time of being useful had passed. But in that room, both men realized something important. Usefulness doesn't end with age, and loneliness doesn't end with wealth. Both had needed someone, and both had found someone unexpectedly, through a mistake that turned into a miracle. The days that followed their meeting were unlike anything the retired electrician had ever experienced. He went back to his small home, expecting life to return to normal, but it didn't. His phone rang more often now, first from the billionaire's assistant, checking in on him, then from the billionaire himself, who seemed to have made it a habit to call every evening just to talk. At first, the electrician didn't understand why. He would listen quietly as the billionaire spoke about his recovery, about the doctors, about the strange feeling of being given a second chance. Slowly, he realized it wasn't about health updates, it was about connection. The billionaire wasn't used to talking to someone who didn't expect anything from him. And the electrician wasn't used to someone seeing value in his presence. What started as polite phone calls soon turned into conversations that stretched late into the night, filled with stories, laughter, and even silences that felt comfortable. Weeks later, the billionaire insisted on visiting the electrician's home. Despite his protests, one morning the same sleek black car pulled up to the modest house, and the billionaire stepped out, looking stronger but still fragile. Neighbors peeked curiously from their windows as the most powerful man they had only seen in newspapers walked into the quiet street. Inside the small living room, there was no grandeur, just a worn sofa, a kettle boiling on the stove, and the faint smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the road. Yet, the billionaire sat down as if it were the finest place he had ever been. "This feels real," he said softly, looking around. "Your home, your life, it feels real. Not like the endless meetings and glass walls I live behind." The electrician poured him tea, embarrassed by the simplicity of it, but the billionaire drank gratefully. as though it was better than anything money could buy. They sat together, two men from different worlds, and spoke like old friends. As weeks turned into months, their bond grew deeper. The billionaire often invited the electrician to his mansion, introducing him not as a savior, but as a friend. At first, the electrician resisted, uncomfortable with the idea of stepping into a world so far removed from his own. But the billionaire insisted, and eventually he agreed. It wasn't about luxury, it was about presence. The billionaire had many employees, advisors, and partners, but very few people who looked at him as a human being rather than a fortune. The electrician became that person. Their story began to spread quietly in newspapers and whispers. Journalists wrote about the stranger who saved a billionaire's life. Reporters tried to reach the electrician for interviews, but he refused. He didn't want cameras or headlines. He only wanted peace. The billionaire respected this and shielded him from the spotlight, making sure that what they had remained personal. One evening, sitting together in the mansion's study, the billionaire turned to him and said, "That night, when I dialed the wrong number, I thought it was a mistake. But now I see it wasn't. It was the best call I ever made." The electrician chuckled softly. "If you ask me, it was just luck." But the billionaire shook his head. "No, it was fate. You saved my life, but you also reminded me what life is really about. Not the money, not the power, but the people who stand with you when you're most alone." The words stayed with the electrician long after. For the first time in years, he didn't feel useless. Retirement hadn't taken away his purpose. Fate had simply handed him a new one in the most unexpected way. In the years that followed, their bond never faded. The billionaire often credited the electrician for not only saving his life, but giving him a new outlook. Together, they worked quietly on small projects to help communities, funding schools, supporting hospitals, repairing homes for those in need. The billionaire provided the resources, but it was often the electrician's simple wisdom that guided where those resources went. Yet, beyond all the projects and gestures, what truly mattered was their friendship. They celebrated birthdays together, shared meals, and spent long hours talking about ordinary things, gardens, childhood memories, even the taste of homemade tea compared to imported blends. And through it all, the electrician never let himself forget the simple truth. It had all begun with a mistake, a wrong number, a moment where he could have easily hung up the phone. But he hadn't. He had listened, stayed, and spoken words that kept a stranger alive. Years later, whenever the story was retold, the billionaire always ended it the same way. He would smile and say, "He thinks it was a mistake. I say it was destiny. Because that call didn't just save my life. It gave me a friend who became family." For the retired electrician, that was enough. He had no desire for fame or riches. What he found instead was far greater, proof that even in the quiet years of life, when the world seems to have moved on, one act of kindness, one choice to stay on the line, can change everything. And so, the story that began with a wrong number ended not with wealth or reward, but with something timeless, an unbreakable bond between two men who should never have met, yet were brought together by fate, by chance, by a single call that turned into a lifeline.